And a good football Friday, Birds fans. We appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365 with John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Got a couple of good guests coming your way over the next couple of hours. Jay Max, since you didn't show up at my house with no one else around, I left the dog by herself for 5 hours, and I went over to the local off-track wagering spot and dropped a couple of bucks at Keeneland and Aqueduct and the like. But I hadn't gotten out and played for 3 or 4 straight hours in a row for a while, but it was fun. But yeah, I should have waited for you to show up at Piers.
Yeah, I was there. Me and the dog had a couple.
You did. You honked a couple of times, and you saw Moxie at the window.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
That's why she made it for the 5 hours. I let her out. She did her business.
Saw your smiling face, and she figured she was okay. All right, that's good to know.
Obvious dog lover, so.
You and I both, and a nice little morning to get the dog out. A little chill in the air, but it's going to warm up today. It was in the 80s yesterday. So luckily spring is here. We're doing that countdown thing, spring, summer, first game of the regular season, now 149 days. But the most important countdown is the days to the draft. 13 to go. Next Thursday night will be round number 1, day number 1. And, John, I did spend some time on a couple of my favorite football sites yesterday, and it just continues to amaze me. You've been doing this a long time. I've been doing it slightly longer. Both of us have logged many a lead up to draft years. I do not remember the actual prognostications, and now there are more than ever before. Shoot, I go back when Mel Kiper's draft guide, my buddy Dave T. Thomas's draft guide, there were 4 or 5 of them. Our lad's draft guide.
Yeah, that's still going, by the way. Our lads, Mel's. Yeah, I don't know if Mel still does his guide. If he does, I haven't seen it, but I used to have all those. I used to love Mel's guide.
Right, but when you had all those, you had all 5 of them.
Yeah.
Now there's 2,000 of them, and you've got to be on top of each and every single one of them. And it just is amazing me that there's not even close to a consensus. Whether you're talking about the first 5 picks, the first 10 picks, the 20 picks, our guy, Kyle Hamilton, is going anywhere from number 4 to number 21 or 22. That just doesn't happen, John. All right, you're off by a couple of spots here, there. One team likes a player more than another. But usually there's a pretty good grasp of where the players rank, how they should be looked at, where they're probably going to come off the board. Man, there are derivations out there this year.
Yeah, and I think it starts with, I think Kyle's the hot button player because of, if he doesn't run poorly, it's not even a question. He's the top 5 pick at worst, top 10. Maybe because of the position, but unfortunately he didn't run well. More at his pro day than the combine. I think it was fine. At the combine wasn't great, but I think it was a 4.59. And if you look at Justin Simmons, who we brought up earlier this week, I think he ran a 4.61. He's arguably the best safety in football right now. So it's not a death sentence that you can't play. If you run a 4.59 at safety, and you and I have been above board, and it's been pretty consistent. And I think that's what we don't know. It's like, well, what do NFL teams think? We don't have all the information that they have, so we get, I think, a little bit too hung up on measurables, particularly, combine numbers and pro day numbers, which are just all over the place. If you're at Penn State, you're going to run a 4.4. If you got the right scout with the quick trigger, you're going to run a 4.6. I mean, from teams' perspective, they get those real numbers from people they trust and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But I do think it's overrated overall. From every coach I've talked to over the years, no doubt about it, you have to reach a certain level of athleticism to be able to play professional football. And each position needs some different things. But once you hit that level, and once they know you have the physical capabilities, then it's about all the other stuff, which is far more important. And, from a film perspective, There's a lot of dumb teams in the NFL, but I can't believe there's that many dumb teams that Kyle Hamilton's going to fall in the 20s. Well, you go back to last year, same school. I would have said the same thing about the linebacker, Owosu Koromoa, not to Hamilton's degree, but that was supposed to be a top 15 pick, a top 20 at the worst. And all of a sudden he falls in the second round. You say, what the heck is going on here? And he's got a health problem. He's got a heart issue. And that explains it. And oh, by the way, he played and he was the top 15 pick. He was one of the best players in the draft. So we didn't get it wrong. The people that said this kid can play, he can play, but there were some concerns over health issues, and that caused him to drop a little bit. So, we unfortunately we don't get all the information we need. And the most important information tends to be health information, things like that. And that usually there's usually an explanation for drops, and it's usually not he ran a 4.59. It's usually some kind of health issue, off the field issue, concern, blah blah blah. If you want to go all the way back to Aaron Rodgers and personality, and it's usually something goofy that doesn't relate to the film. And usually there's not multiple teams. There's definitely bad organizations. We're going to start with a bad organization. Number one overall. That is a horrific organization. Doug, if you're listening, Godspeed, good luck to you. I mean, they're just a disaster in everything they do. So that fuels into the uncertainty. It's a draft that doesn't have a top quarterback. So you can probably justify, if you're Carolina, taking Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis, but you can't do it at number one, and they wouldn't want it because they're back-to-back number ones anyway. But even for somebody who wanted to trade up to the Jacksonville spot, well, you generally want to trade up for a quarterback. You don't want to trade up for an edge rusher that might not even be as good as the second or third edge rusher, depending on which player you like. So it's just there's not a quarterback, and the best players don't play positions the NFL values on draft day, and the ones that do play those positions aren't as good as the recent ones. So if you look at Aiden Hutchinson, for instance, or Kayvon Thibodeau or Trayvon Walker, they're not Myles Garrett. They're not the Bosa twins. They're not even Chase Young from a prospect standpoint.
They've got decisions to make. And I'll just say this for Kyle Hamilton, if he does come down to number 15 and the Eagles are quick enough, smart enough to take him, sometimes information is accurate and evaluations are accurate, and sometimes they're off a little bit. And the Eagles should be happy that 2 decades ago, the rest of the National Football League decided to pass on Brian Dawkins all the way through the first round into the second round, where the Eagles were able to get him. If I remember correctly, same thing. Doc didn't light up the scoreboard out in Indianapolis, didn't run as fast as some other safeties, and therefore he dropped down, and the Eagles were lucky enough to get him in the second round. Now, Hamilton's not going all the way to the second round, but if he drops down to number 15, I would surely take him. John, you and I have discussed for the last 10 days about who the Eagles are bringing in for their pre-draft visits, and you said, Jody, the individual names are important, but also keep an eye on the positions, that can be as telling as the individuals they're bringing in. They've been active at the wide receiver spot. They brought in or bringing in a safety over the next couple of days, the Penn State kid. So there are positions that they're giving us a peek at that they're at least considering. Which is a bigger need for the Eagles? A second wide receiver behind Devontae Smith, or a top? I'm sorry, Anthony Harris, but if they take a safety with the first pick of the draft, that'll be safety one if we had such a thing in the NFL. Which position, in your estimation, is more important for the Eagles to fill wide receiver?
Well, I'll ask you a question before I answer that, Jody. Do you believe the Eagles? if you believe the Eagles, wide receiver would be the more important position because they need to evaluate the quarterback and they have to build around the quarterback and they have to get the quarterback weapons. I don't believe the Eagles. So, how do you want to go? How do you want to go about this? How do you want to build? How do you want to try to win games?
Let me rephrase the question because you turned it around on me, which you should have. If Howie Roseman called John McMullen this afternoon and said, "Listen, I need a little advice here. We're kind of at a toss-up position between the two. As a matter of fact, if I could show you my draft board, which I won't because you're a dreaded member of the media, we have the exact same grade on Hamilton and Olave. We'll use him as an example because they brought him in yesterday. So it purely comes down to, for us, which of the two guys is a bigger help to the team, year 1, year 3, year 5, year 10. If he was asking for your advice, which way would you tell him to go?
Well, in that scenario, I take Kyle Hamilton, but that's kind of unfair to Chris Olave because I love Kyle. I think Kyle Hamilton's the best football player in the draft. I really do.
Yep.
I think he's the best football player in the draft. So maybe the better would be Dax Hill or Chris Olave. And then I think it's a far more difficult decision for me. And I would probably still lean toward defense because I think this is going to be a running based team again, and not necessarily conventionally as they weren't last year. Their leading rusher last year, I think people forget, had whatever Miles had, 757 yards, whatever the number was. The quarterback's a big part of that rushing attack. So I think they're going to use that unconventional compared to the rest of the league offense again. And if you want to win games that way, you got to make sure the defense is a lot better. And they've made at least incremental improvements with Hassan Reddick and Kaiser White, but they've also taken steps back with no Steve Nelson and Rodney McLeod. Now, they wanted to get better at those positions anyway, but you have to get better. So one of the things everyone says, Jody, when free agency starts in this league, you want to fill as many holes as possible with at least Band-Aids so you don't feel this necessity to reach for a particular position. And I was thinking about this yesterday. When from the start of free agency to now, I think the Eagles have looked like they have more needs than when they started this process. And Howie's right when he says this is a snapshot. We still got the draft. We still got post-draft. Tyrann Mathieu out there. If he comes in all of a sudden after the draft, you're like, oh, that's pretty good at safety. That's an improvement of us. So there's plenty of room to improve, and he's 100% right when he says that. However, if you use that thought process, which he's always said, him and every other GM, well, to this point, you haven't done a good job because you're heading to the draft when we say, what if you want to take the kid from Jordan? What if Jordan Davis is there at 15, but you feel this incredible need to, we got to get a wide receiver. We haven't been able to get Calvin Ridley and Robert Woods and Allen Robinson and Christian Kirk. What if you feel that need to say, there's only one corner left and we don't have the safety net. We can't call Steve Nelson after the draft and say, Steve, come back. What if you feel that compel and you take a player who isn't as good as a player you could get, but you have more talent at that particular position? I don't think Howie Roseman has set the Eagles up well. T-minus 2 weeks to the draft. I think they're more susceptible. Doesn't mean they have to reach, but they're more susceptible to reach now because they haven't filled the holes they've needed to fill with at least safety nets.
You and I agree on that. All right, so let's try and fill one of those holes right here, right now. You and I get the message to Howie. two of the best free agents left on the market are both secondary players. I'd rank them both in the top 5, as a matter of fact, maybe the top 3. And I'm referring to the Honey Badger and Stephon Gilmore. There was a report out there yesterday that Gilmore is talking to the Rams. Well, there was a report out there that the Honey Badger was talking to the Rams. Does just every good free agent end up at the Rams?
Well,
they
want to.
Number 1, it's LA. Number 2, they're coming off a championship. I don't think the Rams are getting both, but if they got one out of the 2, so be it. If players are willing to take a little bit less than they could get somewhere else just to go to Hollywood, there's nothing you can do about that. Some people consider Hollywood to be more of a destination than Philadelphia. I don't, but I don't matter. I'm already here. Let's say the Rams are going to get one of the 2, which that means the other one is not going to Hollywood, going somewhere else, one of the other 31 teams, and maybe the Eagles could jump in if they had the desire and the money to be able to put a pretty good deal on the table. If they could be the aggressor rather than the Rams offers are out there for both players, and they're both sitting on them. They'd like to get more, but they're not getting more from LA. Which one would be the better fit for the Eagles? Just average market deal, not above and beyond, not paying a tax, but also not getting them cheap. What John McMullen would consider a fair market deal, both 1 years for either of those players. Which one do you think is a better fit with the Eagles?
I think Tyrann. It's probably not even close, the Honey Badger, because that's the type of player Jonathan Gannon wants. And, the versatile safety that can move around and play a bunch of different positions. And they play a lot of cover 2 anyway. Now, I presume if they get a better corner opposite Darius Slay, he might be able to do some different things. But either way, he's going to be a heavy zone guy. So I don't think I think you can cobble it through. I think last year's a perfect example. I mean, Steve Nelson did a fine job as a compliment. And, part of the reason is he's not out there on an island a ton where maybe he could get exposed with a lack of speed. So I think you could mask more issues at corner than you can at safety in his particular defense, what he wants to do. So I don't think that's close. But I think the Eagles are waiting, and they're playing this waiting game. Like, they want to see what they get in the draft. And, all right, maybe it all works out. But if it doesn't, and all of a sudden, like you said, the Rams, the Colts seem to be zeroing in on Stephon Gilmore, and a bunch of indie reporters were, buzzing yesterday saying they want to get something done. Indianapolis is serious with Stephon Gilmore. So all of a sudden, if they get him, and then you have Matthew, who, part of this might be his agent. Let's be honest. I mean, I haven't heard much from the Rams side. I've heard more from the Matthew side. Same with the Saints. I mean, he wants to play in New Orleans. I don't think there's a ton of interest. So he might fall into the Eagles' lap. And, they might be playing this right. But it is a gamble. It is a gamble when you do that and you wait and you wait to see what you get in the draft.
And or the gamble being you might get the player, but you might get him on a bad deal. That they sniffed the desperation because you didn't fill that void you were looking to fill in the draft. So they're in a better position, and you have to acknowledge, hey, we got to do something. We can't just go back out there with what we have as of right now. So you end up paying the guy a little bit more. We don't know how it's going to shake out. Here's what we do know. 13 days from now, some questions will be answered. They'll be further answered when they get out there on the field. More important answer when they get out there on the field, but at least on paper, we'll know the guys will be in green come August when they get down to the training center for the Birds. All right, we got 2 good guests coming your way. Hour number 2, it's going to be our bud. The other half,
Ed just popped on. Ed, you're at 9:20 today.
Oh, I thought that was our first guest.
Isn't Ed at 9:20? Minnie's at 8:20, or am I screwing this up?
No, you got it right. Eddie's just up and at him early. We usually punch him up at 8:20.
Yeah, he's used to it. That's my fault. I should have emphasized 9:20.
Okay.
Hopefully Ed Kratz can still be here at 9.
Well, here's what you do, Ed.
He
Stay
gave me
there.
a thumbs up.
What's he gonna do? Go out and walk the dog too, like you and I? So we'll just
Yeah.
tell him to hang out in case Vinny bags, because our two scheduled guests were Vinny Serrato, former general manager of the Washington football team, used to be the Redskins, now the Commanders. Call them whatever the hell you want. The Nation Capitals football squad. Their former general manager turned talk show host in Baltimore, Vinny Serrato, scheduled to join us, as is the other half of the Eagles Maven on Sports Illustrated, Ed Kratz. Here's a teaser if there ever was one. We're going to take a quickie timeout. Then you're going to come back and find out who's joining the show. Will it be Vinny Serrato or will it be Ed Kratz? Stick around and find out.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Thanks for hopping aboard on a Football Friday here on Verse 365. Donald McMullen and our first guest of the day, the former general manager of the Washington football team, doing middays on 105.7 The Fan down in Baltimore, NFL guru, Vinny Serrato. How are you, Vin?
Good morning, guys.
Morning, Vinny. Good to see you. It's exciting. It's always exciting to get a former NFL high-level exec on the program. So it's especially exciting at draft time because we're T-minus 2 weeks. I want to start there. We have so many controversies with your old Washington football team. We got to get into that, but I want to hold that. I want to talk about the stage of the draft and where we are here. How quickly, typically, in your time in the league, do people set that draft board? Where should they be right here? Because here in Philadelphia, we're still hearing about top 30 visits, and we're 2 weeks out. So how malleable is that stuff this close to day one of the NFL draft?
Yeah, it's all still part of the process, you know. And we didn't finalize. I I never finalized our board.
You got it frozen? I got frozen, Jody.
I didn't trust anybody,
Here
so
we
I didn't want to show anybody. I didn't want to show anybody the draft board. That was the thing.
Yeah,
Xander, we're good. We're
I
gonna.
don't know if it's because Vinny. I looked like Vinny was attempting to do it via his phone, which if you get out and about, sometimes you unfortunately lose.
By the way, I was doing a phone hit somewhere else on StreamYard for another show, and they had a bunch of problems with me using the phone. I never had those problems before. I wonder if StreamYard's having some issues when people using their phone, but. Hopefully we'll get Benny back. He just popped back up. Let's see if Xander. So we lost you, Benny. Yeah. You were in the midst of describing where we are sort of in the process.
Yeah. 2 weeks out. 2 weeks out, you're still a long ways away because you can do the 30 visits till today. Today's the last day. And then I tell you how important those visits are. I mean, we had different guys come in that, during the visit, because I always felt like those kids can be programmed by their agents for 15 minutes, but when they're at your facility for 24 hours, the real guy's going to come out. We had one, probably wouldn't surprise you now, but like Kellen Winslow.
We got Kellen. We're going to get, I assume he was talking about
Joe's
Kellen
waiting
Winslow
in the lobby.
Jr.
Joe calls me, says, no Kellen. So he goes up, knocks on the door, and nothing. So then he knocked again, and then Kellen comes like real groggy, like, hello, And then he comes over to the facility. He's over to the facility, and we're saying, where's Kellen? Sleeping, So, I mean, and it came down to Kellen Winslow and Sean Taylor, for the 5th pick of the draft that year. Both teammates, both Miami guys, but those kind of things, are things that happen, during those 24 hours. We had another one. I won't tell you his name, but everybody was there. We were at the Mortons. We had a private room, and we're sitting there with it was a defensive player, first round, like it was going to be a top 10 pick. And we're sitting at the table. Was there, decor, Greg Blosh, Dan Snyder, everybody was there. And when he left, everybody to a man says, no way we will draft that kid. 0 chance. He was kind of a jerk, So, I mean, you learn a lot about those things. We had another kid that we brought in because we wanted to check his learning. How did he learn? Because there was questions, he had a real low Wonderlic, and there was questions from the scouts on how well he learned. So we brought him in, put him on the board, then took him outside and had him walk through, and then come back and then talk through it. So it was going to be a process with that kid, so those are the kinds of things that, you're doing on those visits. It's not just showing up. He's spending most of that time. If he's an offensive player, he's spending most of that time with the offensive coaches. And then maybe a player comes to dinner, with us also.
A couple good stories there, Vin. Let me ask you if you have one in particular where you had a kid and maybe you brought him in and you decided either A, he was a jerk, or B, not a hard enough worker, but the tape just said, man, this kid can flat out play. He's a stud. He's athletic. He's got so many things going for him that I don't care. We'll coach the jerk out of him. We'll get him to become a worker. He's a better player than where we're thinking about taking him in the draft, or vice versa. Kid that you didn't take, that you go, damn, we should have known we could improve his attitude because he's just that talented a player. You ever have one of those where the evaluation of the skills didn't match up to the personality of the player? So, Vinny's unfortunately dropping.
It's one of those days, Jody. The
it
dropping.
May well be.
Yeah. What can you do? Hopefully we'll be able to get Vinny back, because these are such interesting stories when it comes to me. I mean, Kellen Winslow. Hey, the fact that Kellen Winslow, and let's make this clear, Kellen Winslow Jr., not Kellen Winslow Sr.
Right.
The fact that he was sleeping is probably better than what could have been what's going on in the ensuing years. So, but yeah, I mean, Benny brings up a good point, an agent, and that's part of the problem with sort of the modern NFL, like, and the combine as well. I talk about it all the time. These guys finish their college stuff, Jody, and they start to prepare for specific combine drills. Like I always say, back in the old day when the combine started, guys are just showing up. They played football. They just show up. They weren't specifically gearing up for so if somebody ran fast, oh, this guy's fast. They weren't training like a track star at all these facilities to make sure they're peaking for one day in at the scouting combine. So it's changed from that perspective. And then Vinny's point about the interviews, you can prepare a kid for 15 minutes to be on his P's and Q's. You can't do it if they're there for a whole day. I mean, the real person is gonna come out at that point.
And oh, by the way, do I know this to be the fact? No. Do I have heavy supposition it is the case? Yes. We forget that leading into this year's combine, the NFL wanted to make it a closed combine, and they did so under the mask of COVID protection.
Yeah.
That they wanted to limit the number of individuals who could come into the combine and help the player and be by the player's side. They were trying to get a truer read on the players, what they were trying to do. Keep them from being coached up and have information. And during that 15 minutes, they said, oh, we want to do this for the players' protections. Well, the agents jumped up and go, no. You're not doing that. You're not closing down the combine. If we have to, we'll pull 300 kids out of there and not give you a look at these guys. And to the agents' credit, they pulled it off, and the NFL backed off and said, all right, we'll let people in, but don't kid yourself. I'm accusing them of being untruthful. Sorry, that's just the way I see it. They were trying to give themselves a chance to get indoctrinated with the kids with a less than prepared style for the combine, and that's why they wanted to put a lid on the combine. Didn't happen, but I think I knew what the actual purpose of trying to make it a more buttoned-down combine was.
Yeah.
You agree with me?
Yeah, no, I agree. And they should have moved it to Philly if they wanted that. And they would have been able to cut it down with the city's blessing. But I joke, of course. But yeah, I mean, they want these kids to show their real personalities. And Vinny was kind of mentioning it as well. About I think he said defensive prospect who was, lights out from the tape perspective, and then goes to dinner with everybody in Morton's and everybody doesn't like him. That happens as well. And we've seen that. That was the knock on Aaron Rodgers. It's always the knock on quarterbacks, because quarterbacks have to get along with everybody. We saw that with Carson Wentz here going in a negative direction. Nobody brought it up leading up to the draft. I think it was in Carson's case, it wasn't an overt, personality where people don't like him. He's more of an introvert, I always say. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, if you show up with this cocky attitude and turn everybody the wrong way, and even something as little as that, these are human beings. That affects things. That affects how people view you. And in the world of analytics, people might scoff at that, but I don't know how you fix people to say, oh, let's ignore the fact this guy's an a-hole because your numbers in a computer say he can play. I mean, you can't just make people do that. You can't just make people turn off that part of their brain, so to speak.
All right. I want to ask a comparable question. Eagles' first overall pick in this year's draft at number 15 specific. Yesterday, they had Chris Olave in for an interview and a workout, the Studley wide receiver from Ohio State. Both Garrett Wilson and Olave, I think, are guaranteed first-round picks. The question is, in what order? The bigger question is, will either or both be available when the Eagles pick at number 15? Another guy who's been talked about as a high first-round pick has been Drake London, the kid from USC, who's a bigger wide receiver, who's a taller wide receiver than either of the two Ohio State kids. And we know what Devontae Smith is. We know what he's capable, or we believe we know what he's capable of. And we also know what kind of and size wide receiver he is. How big a deal is it in your mind, John, to get a bigger wide receiver, a guy who's going to be able to play on the outside, maybe a little bit more that you wouldn't think about putting in the slot? Then again, there are some teams that put big guys in the slot and think they can take that much more of an advantage over a smaller inside corner. Trying to get a wide receiver whose physical capabilities are a little different than Devonta Smith. How big a deal is that to you?
It's not as big a deal as it once was, for a couple reasons. One, because the Eagles have gone this route in the past and they failed trying to find specific types of players. So, they failed.
Are you referring to J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? Is that what
One
you're
of them,
getting at?
But I'm also talking about Jalen Reagor as well, different type of players. So they've gone for types of receivers. And, typically wide receivers, you have Z, X, and flex or slot. Now, Nick Sirianni.
You want to do a solid for our listeners. I think most of our listeners, John Bird's 365 viewers, are pretty well in tune, but maybe we've got a couple of casuals. Break down the types of wide receivers that you're referring to any of the casual football fans that are listening.
Well, I think everybody understands slot, and that's sort of, you think of the Wes Welker types, the Julian Edelmans in New England, the small, quick guys. Typically, as you mentioned, there's sometimes Jordan Matthews here was a slot receiver, is a bigger guy, had some success, especially early in his career. But generally, it's those small, quick guys who have that great short area quickness and are really good on option routes, chain movers, good third down receivers. I think everybody kind of understands the slot probably better than anything else. Devontae's a traditional Z, and the X's, think Alshon Jeffrey, the big 6'3" guy, and that's at the height of his career. He's the perfect example of an X receiver. Now, Nick Sirianni has always said he doesn't like, pigeonholing guys, and he wants guys to play everywhere. And that, if you can do that, that's great, because you never know where somebody's going to line up, what they're going to do, what their responsibility is. If you can morph different players into different positions, that's all well and good. My point is the Eagles have failed trying to get that Alshon Jeffrey type, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. They failed trying to get sort of the more modern, and I'll throw in the manufactured touch guy, who sort of is usually going to play Z or slot. But, if you're Deebo Samuel, you can play running back, you play anywhere. And that's sort of the new age football of a guy who can truly, like, you can say it, Nick has said it, oh, I want everybody to play different positions. But not everybody can play those different positions the way they need to be played. A guy like Deebo Samuel can. Those are few and far between. So, long story short, Jody, if I'm the Eagles, I'm just taking the kid who can play, sort of like last year. Now, I always say with receivers, from my perspective, and I talked about early in the show, once you reach that baseline level of being the type of athlete that you can play receiver at a high level in the NFL, and the names, we've talked about them, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Dotson, Burks, those are the potential first-round picks. They can all play from an athletic standpoint. So to me, the greatest indicator of success once you reach that level, by far, is route running. Where are they when it comes to route running? Devontae, the best. We just saw a bunch of them. Devontae Adams, maybe the best route runner. If he's not, Stephon Diggs might be. He might be the best route runner in football. Tyreek Hill's a great route runner. These guys not only have that top tier athleticism, but they can create separation just because they're so sharp with their routes. And, sometimes those contested catch guys, they can create separation. And guess what? It's easier to make contested catches at the college level and the pro level. And that becomes a problem. And then the manufactured touch guys are the biggest problem at all. Because if you have to be cognizant as a play caller, this guy can't win on a route. Right. So I have to get him the football. I have to manufacture a touch. That is difficult. That is difficult to do from a discipline perspective. It's difficult to get back to and say, I got to get back to this. I got to get back to this. Whereas you can just point to a guy and say, run this route, and he's going to get open. Those are the great receivers. And that's why if I'm the Eagles, I'm looking at Jameson Williams. Even with the injury, I'm looking at Garrett Wilson, but I don't think Wilson is going to be there. And then probably Chris Olave would be number 3.
The thing with manufactured touches, and that's a relatively new phrase in the National Football League. Some phrases have been around for 50 years. Others get created as we go, as the game changes. But manufactured touch is one that's only been around for a couple of years. And in the Eagles' case, yes, we believe they attempted to do some of that with Jalen Reagor. Here's the issue for me with manufactured touches. You have to be perfect. There can't be. If you're just going to be throwing the football down the field, trusting your wide receiver on his ability to either get open or run the pinpoint perfect route. The thing with the manufactured touch is everything has to go exactly right, because you're basically giving the defense a chance to play straight up. There's nothing in motion ahead of time. Everybody's coming forward toward the football. So you have to have the perfect throw with the perfect first move, with everybody, and I mean everybody, with the perfect first block. Otherwise, you're going to get caught for a 4 or 5 yard loss. It's foolish. It's got upside potential, but it's got more downside than anything else. And I'll give the Eagles offensive line credit. And there are other wide receivers. We always hear about how great a blocker J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is. And Devontae Smith, is as small as he is willing to put in the work and the effort to try and block. No, it's on the player. It's Jalen Reagor. They thought he was going to be a guy who was going to be able to do something once he got the ball in his hands with great moves and with great acceleration. He just doesn't have it. That's the problem. I don't think the plan to do so is necessarily off, and or most of the execution for them this past year was necessarily off. No, I just think it was the wrong player. That's why I'm not averse to them, if they decide to do it, having another player like that. Now, I wouldn't do it with Burks in the first round, but if there's someone later in the draft, the second wide receiver you're going to take who's a manufactured touch guy, I wouldn't be afraid of it just because it didn't work with Jalen Works.
Well, by the way, you're right. I'm wrong. I'll say that, right? You can't run your team like that and say, because we failed with Jalen Reagor, we can't do it again. But when you get burned that badly, it's tough to go back that quickly. But you're right. You should always not – Burks has nothing to do with Jalen Reagor. So it's not his fault that Jalen Reagor didn't succeed in Philadelphia or hasn't succeeded to this point. So you're 100% right there. But my bigger thought is you have a better chance to get it right with somebody who can just run the route tree.
Yep.
It's just a better chance to get it right because guess what, Jody? You can also get them the football in a manufactured way. You can get them involved with bubble screens. Now, you're probably not going to do as much running from the backfield or Deebo Samuel stuff or jet motion or that kind of stuff. But you can still get them manufactured touches. And if they're able to get open, and then on the back end of that, you talk about the Eagles quarterback and Jalen Hurts. And whatever you think about Jalen Hurts, if you're being honest with yourself, he is a guy who is not at this stage of his career an anticipatory thrower. So in other words, he is not going to throw people open. He's throwing to open receivers. So go get a receiver who can get open, like Devontae Smith. And that's why they hit on Devontae Smith. Do it again. You might have to wait for Jameson Williams, but he would be my pick, because I think he's the best receiver in the draft. And then Garrett Wilson, who I don't think is going to be there, and then probably Chris Olave. So those are the three I would center in on if I were the Eagles. What the Eagles are going to do, I don't know, but they're going to get a receiver in the top 51, and it might be in the second round. If it's the second round, you're probably looking at the big X receiver that I talked about. They had George Pickens in from Georgia. He's a big X receiver. Christian Watson, I don't think he's going to fall that far, but he's a big X receiver. If they wait, they're probably just going to go for that.
And I would put Wilson ahead of Williams only because of the health issue. And I think over time, Williams is going to be fine. If I believe that it was just going to be a half a season wait till Williams was there, I don't even know if that's going to be a fair or accurate description. I want to see results year number one. I get it. It's the big picture, 5 years. You open the guy's here for 8 years as a player, and that has to be a big consideration as well. I rate them both basically evenly, and because of the fact that you're going to have to wait for Williams a little bit, that would be enough for me to take Wilson if they're all on the board, which we know they're probably not going to be. That's why we're waiting here 13 days. Can't get here fast enough that we get to Thursday night and see how it all shakes out. One of the things that has been shaken out, our conversation, other people's conversations, and again, it's all informed speculation, but that's all that is speculation at this point. Don, we've stopped talking about edge rushers. That was for a longest period of time leading up to the draft before they dropped down and decided we're only taking 2 first-round picks rather than 3, made the trade with the Saints that they did when we believed that the Eagles had taken 3 players in the first round in the first 18. Well, they're taking an edge rusher. Nobody's saying we know they're taking an edge rusher anymore. And you know what that means, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, you're
that
not
much
happy
more
about
Derek
that.
Barnett in the lineup for the Eagles this coming season.
The only place we differ there is people aren't talking about edge rusher as much, but I think that's because it's becoming pretty clear that, well, at best, one is going to be on the board of that top 5 at best. So how do you get the edge rusher? I think they're getting an edge rusher in the top 51 picks. And we mentioned the top 30 visits. They had the kid in from Penn State. They had D'Angelo Malone, who's a lesser known kid from Western Kentucky. He's going to probably be a day 2 pick. I mean, they're still going to get an edge rusher. I don't know if they're going to be in a position to get an edge rusher at 15 or 18. And if they are, it's probably going to be Karlaftis. And there's another one of those guys who all over the place. I've seen some people say somebody might go for him in the top 10, and I've seen him falling into the mid 20s. So maybe he's there, maybe he isn't. I don't know where the Eagles are on did they like him as a player? I know they worked him out privately. So they've done their homework. But he's the guy. So if he's there at 15 or 18, would I take him? I would take him. I don't know if the Eagles are going to take him. But here's where I am with those top 51 picks. I'll go into the second round. I think they're going to come out of there with an edge rusher, a wide receiver, and a corner. And I'm not sure, and that kind of brings us back to where we started the show. I don't want to be in that position. Like if Jordan Davis is there, I want to take Jordan Davis.
Right.
I don't think the Eagles have put themselves in a good position entering draft night. I really don't.
I think they're short. I think your analysis is on point and accurate. And Howie will feed us what he fed us at the owners meeting a couple weeks ago. Hey, it's the long haul. We need to evaluate the roster when we show up in training camp. Till then, there's a lot of maneuvering to do. The draft is the biggest part of it, but there's still free agents out there. But the free agents are dwindling every single day. Another guy comes off the board, maybe not one of the big ones, but a name or two signs basically every day in the National Football League during the offseason. Yeah, you want to get as much done as you can. You don't want to overpay. You don't want to make a mistake, but you do want to have pieces in place before the draft ever comes up. And for both John and myself, it sounds like we both believe there's a couple too many holes to fill with the draft, even with extra picks this year. And one of 8 teams in the league that have 2 first-round picks, they've also got holes. So we'll see if Howie Roseman can get it done. All right, Jody McDonald and John McMullen, we are your Birds 365 guys. We're sorry that we couldn't continue the conversation with Vinny Serrato, the ex-general manager of the Washington football team.
Technical difficulties. It happens. It happens. In a streaming world. Come on. Everybody talks about streaming. Come on, StreamYard. Get it together. You should be able to do these things on the phone. People are busy. Benny took time out to do the show, and what can you do?
Yeah, there's nothing. There's sometimes technical difficulties get the better of you. We'll shoulder on because McMullen looks okay. I never look good, but at least pass is passable for the day. We'll get another follically challenged individual up here about a half an hour from now. Ed Kratz, Sports Illustrated, Eagles Maven with Johnny Mack. We'll jump aboard. Come back. We haven't talked quarterback in a while. Maybe we need to talk a little quarterback because
Kyler Murray. When does that start, Jody? When does that start?
Kyler Murray to the Eagles? Well, we'll see if John McMullen wants to start it. Next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
got your Mac and Mac guys holding down the fort on a football Friday here on Birds 365. We ask all our loyal streamers to do what, J-Mac?
Like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't like.
Come on. What do you got better to do?
Yeah.
You help your boys out. Do us a solid. Hit the like button. We could use your help. Hopefully you like the show. So there's no reason for you not to hit the button. Don't know if the Arizona Cardinals like Kyler Murray as much as he would like to be liked at this time, Johnny Mac. Do I believe Kyler Murray's coming here to the Philadelphia Eagles? No, I don't. But there are implications of what's going on out in Arizona that could hit here in Philadelphia before you know it. We've talked enough about what happens if Jalen Hurts has an improved season and steps up and is better. Finished, unquestioned franchise quarterback, that's unlikely, but he takes a good stride or two in the right direction, then guess what? The Eagles are in the same position the Cardinals are right now. Year to go. Do you extend him or do you just let it sit out there and the potential of having to throw a franchise tag on, which is a major jump up in salary and the like? If it can happen to Kyler Murray as the number one pick, it could surely happen to Jalen Hurts as a second round pick. It's always a strange and strained dance that teams have to do with starting quarterbacks in this league.
Yeah, and I think, part of and by the way, I agree with this. Part of the reason people don't think that's going to happen in Philadelphia is because of the type of person Jalen Hurts is and is proven to be. And for the most part, I agree with that. I don't think he's going to create waves. We always talk about the whispers. He's generally not affected by those. But I do think people dismiss the fact that at some point, everybody has a breaking point. And we said, nobody's talking about Kyler Murray. I just looked at it. Oh, Pro Football Talk has it up now. Talking about the potential trade partners for Kyler Murray. And sure enough, the Eagles are in there. Yeah. Now, it's just speculation.
Before we
it's
go
not reporting. It's not reporting. It's just speculation. But, they said the three teams that lost out on Deshaun Watson. What was it? The Saints, the Panthers, and who am I missing? Either way. And the Eagles. And it's just because Falcons. Thank you, Xander. And it's just because the Eagles, everybody thinks they need a quarterback and why does everybody think they need a quarterback? Now, a lot of fans, because I get this all the time, Jody, think we're making all this stuff up. We're not making all this stuff up. The Eagles are, they were really hot and heavy on Russell Wilson and they have been really since he was drafted. They can't stop talking about it. And Deshaun Watson as well. Now, ultimately, and I've said it before, we see how fiscally responsible this team is, whatever term you want to use. I don't think they were paying what Cleveland paid Deshaun Watson, and certainly not fully guaranteed. So ultimately, it wasn't going to matter. But for the same reasons, I can't believe they'll go anywhere near Kyler Murray. He's clearly a better player than Jalen Hurts. He's clearly a very good player. But we're now at 7 quarterbacks, Jody, I think. Might be 8, 7 or 8. Over $40 million average annual value. Kyler's going to make $40 million, whether it's in Arizona or somewhere else. Plus, on top of it, you got to give up all the draft assets to get him. Not going to be cheap. I don't think the Eagles are going to be in that conversation. The Eagles want an upgrade over Jalen Hurts, but they only want a superstar upgrade. And from their evaluation, that superstar upgrade was Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. Aaron Rodgers, we know, was not realistic, so throw him out the window. There was no concern or thought from the Eagles because they know that was completely out of the box. I don't think they want even that next tier, they would rather wait for it in the draft, and go the more cost-effective route, and you at least get the 4 years, really 3 years now, of before you have to start talking about extension. But as a second-round pick, we're already basically there with Jalen Hurts. You got 12 more months. That's it. Then you got to make a decision. In the assumption that people, I can't tell you how many people, Jody, have told me, well, just make him play out his final year of his rookie deal. You can say that. You can say that all you want, but what you're showing, not only the player, but also the team, you're saying, we don't believe in this guy. There are bigger statements by not working out an extension with a quarterback. Nobody, Jody, in this league ever wants to go into season with a lame duck quarterback or a lame duck coach, because the finality is obvious. They don't believe in the guy. And if everybody knows you don't believe in the guy, well, everybody knows you don't believe in the guy. It's as simple as that.
It is not preferable, but it is not a toss either. I actually think it could come down to that. And I know you just made a pretty well laid out plan as to why it wouldn't work. But sometimes you just get caught between a rock and a hard place. Ask the Washington football team, who did it with Kirk Cousins for a couple of years. And they made the playoffs with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, playing on a franchise tag. Didn't make a Super Bowl, didn't make a long playoff run, but they did make the playoffs. So it's not, oh my God, if you got a guy playing on a tag, you're destined to be 4-13. That's not necessarily the case.
But I wrote about this because you're right, Jody. He's the template, right? Kirk Cousins is the template. I wrote about this at Philly Voice this week on Philly Voice. Here's the path you're talking about with Kirk Cousins. You have to have a player who believes in himself, right? Is willing to bet on himself, which is not hard. That part of it's not hard. You have to have a player that plays well enough to where he's worthy of franchise tag money, but not well enough to where the team says, oh, I'll pay him a lot for 1 year, but I don't want to get a cost-effective deal done for 3 or 4 years, which the Eagles want to do. So you have that side of it. And then if you go to next year, which Washington did, it's a kicker of 10%.
Right.
And Jody, the franchise tag for this year was $29 million at quarterback. And that was before the rework deals with Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr. And I'm missing Watson. One.
Yeah.
So that's only going up. What's it going to be next year? $32, $33 million. You're in the same boat anyway. So the path is not worth it. And the only way that would come to fruition if the player himself says, you know what, I deserve $45 million, and I'm willing to take $33 million for 2 consecutive years. And that path is so small, Jody. You know, I probably spent too much time discussing it that it's worth discussing.
It is the exception, not the rule. You and I agree on that. I'm just saying it's not an impossibility.
Oh, it's not an impossibility.
Chance of happening is not zero. Most places, certain things have to line up perfectly, and they did in DC for them to go down that road with Cousins. There are similarities here, which if most teams, it's a 2% chance of happening. I'm saying here in Philadelphia, it's more like a 10 to 15% chance of happening, just because what the player is, what the player has achieved so far, the organization strategy, you've laid it out for us on many a time. The Eagles aren't a team that's willing to just throw all the chips in the middle of the table and say, we're all in on this. No, they're patient. And they don't let the market dictate them. We continue to talk about the wide receiver position. Yeah, that's scary for me from an Eagle perspective. The fact that it seems that they're a little trepidatious to be ahead of the curve on the wide receiver market. that I keep throwing names and you're going, yeah, but the Eagles aren't going to jump into that market. Yeah, but that's not the Philadelphia Eagles. That's not the way the Philadelphia Eagles do business. Well, because of that, that's why I'm telling you, Jalen Hurts going down the franchise tag might be something that they would be willing to do, because if they don't really believe that he's a $45 million quarterback over a number of years, well, we can just take it 1 year at a time.
Well, yeah, and that's why I put the number 30, because that's where it is. And I don't think they think he's a $30 million a year quarterback. So, and by the way, I can't necessarily disagree with them. And that's why I think it is all, I've said it on the show before. I'll get people mad again. Why not? It's Friday. Got some time to mull it over and stew it over. They've already made their decision. They're trying to get in a position to take a quarterback in the 2023 draft. Now, he's got the luxury of 17 games, right? And I say that's what Jalen Hurts has. And if you play well enough in the NFL, nobody's taking you off the field. So he does have an opportunity to change their thought process, but he hasn't changed their thought process to date. They don't think he's a $30 million quarterback, never mind a $45 million quarterback. And that's 30 is going to be below average pay, believe it or not, for an above average quarterback in 2 years. It's going to be a bargain. It's going to be a bargain. It already is in a lot of ways. People talk about, now that we've seen the spike, and we just brought up Kirk Cousins, now he's kind of a bargain at his rate. Now that you have 8 quarterbacks or over 40 million, and Kyler's coming down the pike, and boy, I don't want to be the Cincinnati Bengals with no liquidity with Joe Burrow, because you got to put all that stinking money, that guaranteed money, in escrow unless they change that rule. Justin Herbert, it's going to explode the quarterback market.
Agreed there. And that's why I think it's so intriguing with this year's draft that the NFL is probably, those teams who are in need are going, man, did we really need this quarterback year this year? This is where we needed to fill in some of those blanks, to do a little hedging and get your future quarterback for the next 5 years, and knowing you're not getting into that 30, 35, $40 million plus range. Except the bottom line is you have to have faith that the player can actually achieve that. And with this quarterback class, I'm sorry. Sorry, Kenny Pickett. Sorry, Malik Willis.
And here's how I described it. And that's why Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are going to get pushed up the board. And we'll see how high. But I think they're both going to go in the top 14, which is going to help the Eagles. The Eagles are fine paying less than $2 million for competency. And that's what they're paying Jalen Hurts right now. They are not fine with paying $30 million for competency. And that's where they will be in sooner, rather. People don't realize how soon it's coming with Jalen Hurts. That's the issue. That's the bar. That's the difference.
And that's what they have to try and decide over the next year or so, because we all believe Jalen Hurts is getting this year. We'll get our Ed Kratz up here in about 10 minutes, and I'll pimp Ed again, because several weeks ago he said, you don't discount the Eagles using a first-round pick on a quarterback. Still a possibility. Hasn't been eliminated as a possibility. Yeah, it has. They're not taking a quarterback with either.
51. It wouldn't shock me at 51. But I will say, I don't think any of the top
Hold on. 51, if they haven't signed anybody else between now and the draft. Corner, safety, wide receiver, defensive end. I like a couple of D ends. I like Ingram still sitting out there on the board, but I don't think the Eagles are going to sign him. But let's say they sign none of them. You really think they're taking a quarterback at 51?
Well, no, I don't, but here's where they could. If Matt Corral or Sam Howell fall to 51, I don't think either is falling to 51. I think they would take them.
Sam Howell's going to be there at 51.
I don't think he is. So I think the top 5 quarterbacks are going to be all gone by 51. So you're not going to have to worry about it. Now, it'll be interesting if he's there. And I know you're not a Sam Howell fan, but I mean, you talk about the mock drafts. You can find plenty of mock drafts that have Sam going in the first round. I don't think he's dropping below 40. We'll see. I think 3 guys are going in the first round, no doubt about it. And it's Pickett, it's Willis, and believe it or not, it's Desmond Ridder, who NFL people seem to like more than draft people. And then I think there's going to be a 4th, and it's going to be between your, as Howie likes to say, your favorite flavor. Obviously, Jody McDonald's going to pick Matt Corral.
Oh, yeah.
Other teams are going to pick Sam Howell. But the loser of that debate, so to speak, isn't going to last long on day 2. In fact, you know, now that they have the 3-day, you know how this works, Jody. Used to work when it was 2 days. There was a big, always a big trade up, not always, but a lot. Somebody would mull overnight and say, oh, wow, so-and-so's still on the board. I'm going to trade up to the top pick in the board. We saw it here with Matt Barkley, Chip Kelly, top pick in the 4th round. The Eagles traded up to get him. They're mulling it over.
That's about where Sam Howell should go. Top pick in the 4th round.
Always happens. Day 2, somebody's going to trade up to 33rd and say, oh, Sam Howell's still on the board. We need a quarterback. Let's go get Sam Howell. Something of that nature. Won't last past 40. That's my prediction.
There's a difference. Your point about the top of the 4th round is dead on and accurate. There's a difference between trading up to the 2nd round because teams would rather trade up to the 1st round. If you're going to take a guy at 33, you're going to do whatever it takes to get to 32 so you can get that extra contract year. Now it's going to be that much more difficult this year because the Lions are sitting there at 32. Yeah. And I think the Lions are a player for quarterback. They're not going to take one at the top of the 1st round, but they're probably going to take one at the bottom of the 1st round. So I don't know that.
I would love to see the Detroit Lions surprise everybody and take Malik Willis, but number 2. Let's see if that happens. But then they'd be willing probably. You're right. You always want that.
Yes. If they take a quarterback with number 2, yes, 32 is very much in play for a trade for a quarterback.
You're right about the 5th-year option with quarterbacks. It's certainly preferable. I just know that when people have time to think about it overnight, they always there's always a bunch of teams that want to move up to get a particular player. So I was talking more of the overnight perspective. And look, I was told, and I said it, the Eagles have those 5 quarterbacks that we're talking about rated above where they had Jalen Hurts in 2020. So, and they took Jalen Hurts at 53. Now, people get mad when I say that. That doesn't take into account the evolution of Jalen Hurts. They're very excited. And one of the things the Eagles say behind the scenes, players usually have ebbs and flows when you talk about their development. They get better, they take a step back. Jalen Hurts has been consistently getting better each and every year of his career. And that's rare. That's rare when you don't have ebbs and flows. He's gotten consistently better. So what I'm trying to say when I say they have 5 players graded ahead of where they had Jalen Hurts, when he was coming into the league, that doesn't take into account the evolution. So they'd be taking a step back by going in that direction. So people will say, well, why don't they take him up there? Because player development is real. And they only want a superstar quarterback to move on at this point, which they haven't been able to get. But the point is, this quarterback class it's not good. I'm not trying to say it's good, but it's gotten to the point where it's a little bit underrated because people take it to this absurd degree. And I'm not talking about you specifically, about these guys can't play at all. These are bridge 1st and 2nd round picks. These are good prospects of the top 5 in this class. They're just not superstar level prospects, and you usually have some at the quarterback position. That doesn't mean they're terrible, terrible players. And I think people have taken the baton and taken it too far. These are good players. They're not great. Good prospects is probably the proper term. They're not great prospects.
Yeah, I don't think Sam Howell's a starting quarterback in the league. We talk about generational talents and franchise quarterbacks. We have a lot of words and tags that we think most people understand what we're meaning when we say them. Starting is a pretty obvious one. You're one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league. And oh, by the way, that's not even always 100% accurate. You could have a guy who's the 40th best, but he's starting for you, and someone else has got a backup that's better than your guy who's sitting on their bench. So I don't think Sam Howell achieves top 32 status in the NFL at any point during his career. That's just my evaluation of the player. But the one of the things that bummed me out from earlier in the show, and I'll get Ed Kratz's opinion on this when we punch him up. Vinny was the perfect guy to talk to about it today because he's doing sports talk in Baltimore these days. Kind of a forgotten guy is Lamar Jackson. What's going to happen with him? Talk about a domino falling. Yeah, Kyler Murray is grabbing the attention again today because he's threatening through leaked information. What is the Mike Sealski phrase again? Information brokers.
Information brokers, yeah.
Yeah, somebody's doing some information brokerage with Lamar Jackson, with Kyler Murray, that he's potentially going to hold out if they don't get a contract done.
Well, yeah, he's not holding out. No, there are no more holdouts. Too much money.
Oh, you didn't read into that today? That's what he's actually threatening?
Yeah, but he
will not play. I've heard a report. He will not play if they do not have a contract.
Well, he could if he doesn't want to play. That's always your option, but you're going to take some pretty significant financial hits with the new CBA if you're going to hold out. So people can say whatever they want to say at this point, but it's just negotiating.
Well, that's what you have to do if you still got a year to run on your deal, right?
Yeah.
Because Murray's not even knocking up against it. Like Baker Mayfield, he's now going to play this year, wherever he's going to play, if he's going to play on the 5th year of his contract. Same thing with Lamar Jackson. We're a year away from that. And Murray, if he's trying to force the deal to get done, the only way you can do it is by threatening to hold out.
Yeah, and Lamar is, but the threat of holdout is not like it once was. I mean, it's not realistic. Like, you can stay away from voluntary work, and that's big for quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are expected to be there because they're leaders of the team. So you can do some different things. But one of the things where D. Smith got a lot of criticism for is that, traditional holdouts, like if you don't show up to training camp, the fines are so substantial now, and you can't waive them. It's written into the CBA. Back in the old days, you can say, we're going to fine them. They stay out for 4 weeks, and then you go, oh, we got a deal. We're waiving the fines. Can't waive them anymore.
Right.
Not allowed. So it's just not tenable. But you can do some different things, and it depends on, semantics. Like people say, you can't hold out of voluntary work. It's voluntary. It's not mandatory. So it's not technically a holdout. So again, it's all semantics. There's some things you can do, but he's not holding out at training camp. If he does, he's not going to play. I guess it's always possible to say somebody can walk away and they're not going to play, but
maybe a guy who was a first-round draft pick in baseball and signed a contract with the Oakland A's
and he has some other
minor league seasons with him. He's actually got an option. And I'll tell you why I think it is viable, John. You're right. The CBA changed, which makes it less viable for most players. But the quarterback market has just gone through the roof so much. This year, he's on his last year as a rookie quarterback. They'd have to claw back. He's scheduled to make less than $1 million. He's got a Jalen Hurts type season this year. And that's where I think the CBA does kind of cover the player's rear end. You're only fining him out of $965,000. He's already got his signing bonus.
The fines are, and I'll look them up in the break. The fines have nothing to do with salary. It's they're just constant, everyday fines.
How big can they be?
I'll look him up in the break. I think it's pretty significant, though. It's significant to the point that D. Smith got a lot of what for it. But the baseball part is.
Yeah, see, I think that's more guys going for their third contract than their second contract, because now you're already making money. Now you're already in the tens of millions of dollars. That rookie contract, I think you can threaten to sit out and be effective and not get crushed by fines.
Well, before you sign your rookie deal, which are slotted, so that is not viable from the standpoint of you're just wasting time because it's slotted. So people talk. There's some argument you'll see every year. A couple guys that'll take long. They're usually arguing about offset language, which I've always described as a married couple that doesn't like each other anymore and just has to fight for the need of fighting, because it only matters if you're an abject disaster and a failure and you can't double dip. But anyway, I'm getting too far in the weeds. Holdouts, and I'll explain it, and I'll look it up in the break. I'll explain it better after the break. They're not tenable in the NFL anymore. Now, you bring up the baseball part of it. That's more interesting, because if he has another option to do something else, you would know better than me. Is he still a legitimate prospect in baseball?
Yeah, no one would know. He was a legitimate first-round draft pick, and he played a couple of years, and he looked okay. He didn't look, oh, my God, he's Bo Jackson and going to be an all-star player. But he looked okay, but the A's would probably take him back because they're in desperate need of cheap talent. And that's what he would be, because he already got his signing bonus. That's the big part of it when you're originally drafted in baseball. All right. Ed Kratz is scheduled to join us next. Yeah, it is the scheduled time for the Eagle Maven. He's stretching. He's getting ready. He wants to talk Eagles football with you here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
You got your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Joining us now is our buddy, one half of the Eagle Maven on SI. Ed Kratz jumps aboard here on Birds 365. Sorry for the miscommunication earlier, Ed. Could have been me, could have been John, could have been Xander, could have been you.
It was me. It was me. Believe me.
It was you?
You're
taking a hit for this?
John sent me a text 3 days ago and asked if I could do the show Friday.
See, now, I should give the reminder so that I'm going to blame it on Xander. Xander took the blame. He said
no, but you put 9:20 in the text, and I just kind of breezed past it because I'm so used to 8:20, and
All right, so here's the most important question we're going to ask you. What the hell did you do for the last hour? Since you were here at 8:20, ready to go, and we're punching you up now. Did you conquer the world in any way from 8:20 to 9:20?
Well, no, I did not. I just kind of, I wish I had an exciting story to tell, but I really, an hour just kind of flew by.
Cup of coffee.
There
we go.
Yeah, read my book.
You watched the Today Show.
No, I didn't watch television. I read a book. I brought the trash out.
Where'd you read?
Book. Yeah, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of this 850-page Stephen King.
Wow.
These Stephen King books, just, there's page after page. It's the one about JFK, 11/23/63, I think, or 62. I think
really?
11/23/63, the date that Kennedy was assassinated. It's a pretty good book. I'm enjoying it.
Very
All
nice.
right, there we get.
Yeah, that's what I did. Nothing, no big story. I didn't go out and solve the world or go for a run. I certainly didn't go for a jog down the neighborhood. That's for sure.
It's nice. You can do it. It's finally nice out. Somewhat nice out.
Yeah.
It was a little
nice.
chilly.
Sunshine. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah. All right. It's Ed's book club, not Oprah's. Should we look under our chairs? Maybe we got a free gift. Everybody at home, look under your chairs.
Damn, nothing.
The Eagles need a couple free gifts, Ed, in the draft. Jody and I have been discussing. A lot of GMs in this league talk about, filling as many needs as possible before the draft, so you don't feel the necessity to reach for a particular position. I got to tell you, Howie always talks about this being a long process, talent gathering season, and he's right. But up to this point, I think the Eagles have more needs now entering the draft than they had when they entered free agency. Is that fair or foul?
No, I think you're right. I mean, it just seems like, now Steven Nelson goes and signs down in Houston. That kind of takes another cornerback off of Howie's speed dial should the cornerback market not develop the way he hopes. But, he even said that the free agency for them is kind of about just sort of building depth at different positions, and really, he got an edge rusher in Hassan Reddick, and rebuilding that pass rush is going to really take precedence for them as the offseason goes on. I think they'll accomplish something in the draft to try to beef that up even more, and they bolstered their linebacker core a little bit, but they got a receiver, two receivers if you count the hurdler from Oregon, but they've done nothing at the cornerback spot or the safety position. I mean, they brought back Anthony Harris, which is all well and good, but, he's a stopgap, 31-year-old who I guess he's only making $2.5 million this year. So 1-year contract. I mean, they really need to address those two positions. And it's weird that we still talk about this cornerback spot. Last year was the same thing. And I remember asking Howie, after 2 rounds of the draft last year when they didn't have a cornerback yet, like what's happening at the cornerback spot? And he said, well, there are different ways to skin a cat, blah, blah, blah. First pick of the third day, they get Zach McPherson, and then they bring in Steve Nelson. So, this to me is shaping up more the same this year. I mean, if they don't get a cornerback in the draft, I will expect them to probably try to acquire one in the summertime at some point like they did last year. And that may come via a trade like they did in 2017 with Ronald Darby coming from Buffalo for Jordan Matthews. We might see something along those lines, but it's so early in the process. But to me, cornerback and safety, the secondary, again, is a position that they need to address.
All right, Ed, I want to take you down the best guess scenario road, which I'm sure we did a month and a half ago. when the Eagles had the 3 first-round picks. There were 4 possibilities of what could happen. The Eagles could stay put and take all 3 picks in exactly the spots they had them. They could trade up, target a guy, use another first-round pick, get to a spot to get a player that they thought was a franchise-type changer, the one that Howie seems to prefer. Trading down to add more draft capital, still could be in the first round, but later in the first round to add another pick, or trade out and trade a pick that's in this year's first round for a future first round pick. They already did that one. They got that done with the Saints. Are one of the three other options has to happen, but which one is more likely of the 2 that don't include just staying and taking the picks where they are, the 2 that they have right now, 15, 19, trade up to get a targeted player or trade back to get more draft capital? They've already got a lot of draft capital with the Saints trade. Which is more likely, trading up or trading back?
I would probably say trading back with that 18th pick. I just think the nature of this draft is so unpredictable. It's hard to find a consensus top 5 or top 10. You don't see the same guy going to the same team, and you don't know how the quarterback position is going to fit into this, or one of these 2 guys or 2 of these guys, Willis and Pickett, going to go in the top 10 and push talent even further down. Listen, I think if the Eagles just stay put at 15 and let the draft come to them based on who's coming off the board, there's still going to be a player that they can take at 15 that I think they'll be happy with. And then with that 18th pick, listen, it's a long stretch between the 18th pick and when they pick again at 51. There's going to be a lot of good players that are going to come off the board in that span, depth type players that can be starting players. And I just think that's a pretty long stretch for someone like Howie, who I think is going to probably want to find a way to make a couple picks between, when they would pick at 15 and then before they pick at 51. I think they would try to spread that out a little bit and have, 2 bites at the apple later in the first round and then another early second round pick before they pick again at 51. So that to me makes sense, to go back from 18 to wherever, mid 20s, late 20s, and try to get another early second round pick so you can kind of space your picks out a little bit better. But that said, last year there were 2 cornerbacks they really liked in this draft, J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, and they would have taken one of those guys had they fallen to 10 or wherever. Had the Eagles been able to trade up to 8 or 9 to get one of those guys, they would have done that. So if they see a guy like Sauce Gardner, kind of floating down boards, which I don't think he will. I think he's probably a top 5 guy, but who knows? Nobody knows really. But what if Derek Stingley is sitting there at 11 or 12 with, Washington at 11 or 12 with Minnesota, and you want Stingley? I mean, I think he's the second best corner in this draft. And I think it was Todd McShay said when we had him on a conference call that he's talked to teams that have Stingley higher than Sauce Gardner. So, listen, if I could see them making a little bit of a move up if one of those guys starts to drop a little bit. But again, if I'm the Eagles, I'm thinking, listen, we have enough players that we like. We could find at 15, and let's see how this draft kind of evolves on April 28th. And let's just sit tight. Let the draft come to us. We'll take who we get, and then we'll see if we can move back with that second pick.
Well, I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go trade up for this reason, Ed. I was looking at this and I want to run it by you. So Howie's been here for a long time, as people know. He arrived, I think, in 2000. People forget that. So he's been with this organization for a long time. But he's been the GM since 2010. And, it's a collaborative process, as Jeffrey Lurie always points out. So we don't know who's responsible for all these picks in that time. But if you go back to 2010, which was the Brandon Graham year, I think Brandon was the 13th pick. Since then, they've gotten some really good players. They got Fletcher Cox. He was a number 12 pick. Lane Johnson was 4th overall. Carson Wentz was 2nd overall. And people can say what they want, but he helped him win a Super Bowl. And then last year you had Devontae Smith, who was 10th overall. Now in that same time frame, you have Danny Watkins at 23, Marcus Smith at 26, Derek Barnett at 14, Andre Dillard at 22, Jalen Reagor at 21. They can't go under 14. They can't go. They start at 15 and 18. If they want to get good players, they've only gotten a good player at 13 and above, Ed. Is that fair, or is this going to change this year?
Yeah, you forgot Nelson Aguilar in that.
I forgot Nelson. And Nelson was 19, maybe?
Yeah, I think, or 20. Yeah, right around that range. But listen, I mean, and all those guys, Aguilar had a great Super Bowl. He had a great 2017 season. Carson Wentz had the great 2017 season. So it's not like they washed out completely. Dillard, to me, still holds some value, right? I mean, he can only play left tackle. I think that they'll try to trade him. He's due his 5th-year option. They have to decide on him in May, but I don't think they're going to give him his 5th-year option, but you never know. But I think you can find a good player at 15. Again, this draft is very deep. I mean, this was a draft everybody pointed to during the pandemic where, okay, this is going to be a good draft. And I think it is. And I think you'll be able to find like a Jordan Davis, maybe. Jordan Davis might fall to 15, and he's
I would take him.
I would absolutely take him. You could have a guy at 15 that you really like, Devontae Wyatt. You could have maybe Trent McDuffie fits in there. I don't know how much they like him, a little bit on the smaller side, but there's going to be a player that, I think they can take at 15 who will be a starting player for this team or heavily used in a rotation if it's a defensive tackle. So I could see them trading up, John, like you say, to maybe get into the top 12 somewhere, maybe 12 with the Vikings, maybe 13 with the Texans, maybe jump up 2 spots if there's someone they really like floating there. But again, it's the type of draft where if you sit tight and be patient, not one of Howie's strong suits, granted, I think they'll be fine.
All right, Ed, let's do a specific position deep dive here, and that's safety. They watched their starting safety for the last several years. McLeod leave this week.
Big loss.
Yeah. Big loss. They have an opening there. I think you're part of the crew. We all like Epsy. We all appreciate what Epsy brings to the table. And we all kind of think Epsy's a role player. He's not a starter. He's not a guy who's going to be a difference maker. We like having him on the team, but he's just not a starter. But he would be their starting safety as of right now. There's a Pro Bowl level safety available that you could go get. His market apparently isn't what it should be because that's why he's not signed this far into free agency. The Eagles have at least shown some interest in him. And I'm referring to the Honey Badger. Why do you think he's not a Philadelphia Eagle yet? If he's even going to become a Philadelphia Eagle, Ed?
Well, because the Eagles haven't given him a 3-year, $30 million contract offer, I think. I mean, it's going to come down to money with the Honey Badger. And at this stage with him, I would just wait until after the draft to see, once teams come out of the draft and they say, hey, we didn't get the guy we want. We need safety help. And then maybe Matthew gets what he wants, which is a multi-year deal starting in the double-digit millions, right? Like 10 million plus for at least 2 years. And, I don't think the Eagles are ready to go there yet. I don't think any team is ready to go there yet. And I don't think any team will be ready to go there until the draft. Now that said, maybe he'll sign on Monday or later today, but I just don't see it. I think it would be beneficial to him to wait to see maybe his price goes up. After the draft, the team gets a little bit more, desperate when they didn't get what they wanted in the draft or hoped that they would get because of the way the board fell. But yeah, if the Eagles offer him what he wants, he'll come. I mean, it's all about, at this stage for Matthew, I think it's all about, the money. I know he wants to play for a Super Bowl contender at this stage of his career. Maybe the Eagles just don't, fit that bill for him, and he's waiting for the Rams to increase their offer. Maybe even the Steelers, they're kind of in the mix. But I think if the Eagles gave him 3 years, $30 million, Matthew would sign on the dotted line in a heartbeat. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that Tyrann is going to wait at least probably until after the draft, and at least in case that desperation increases in one of those cities you're talking about, Ed. One of them could be Philadelphia. So I look at the draft and we talk about edge rusher a lot. We talk about wide receiver. We talk about corner. We don't talk about safety that much because the Eagles have never taken a safety in the first round of the draft. Obviously, they're going to draft one at some point. But how high would you consider a safety in this particular draft, especially if Kyle Hamilton starts to fall because he didn't run that well at his pro day? If he falls to 15, do you think the Eagles consider him and take a first-round safety for the first time in franchise history?
I think they'd be foolish not to. If he falls to 15, my goodness, yeah, I would take him. It's interesting if he's there or Davis is there, though. Jordan Davis, I think they'd probably go with the defensive lineman over the safety. But if Davis is gone and maybe Wyatt's gone because, Hamilton is falling, so some of these teams that we think will take him could take somebody else or going to take somebody else. But I haven't seen a mock draft, I don't think, that has him falling out of the top 10.
Well, we've seen a bunch.
Oh, yeah.
Have you?
One had him going down in the 20s to the Patriots. The Eagles passing on him twice.
Wow, I didn't see that. Who was that? Yeah. Your son, Jody? Was that one of your kids that made that?
Somebody on
NFL.com,
or NFL Network.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm talking
NFL
about.
Network. Yeah.
This draft is so unpredictable. We just don't know how it's going to unfold. And, I don't see the Eagles and Howie making a move like he did last year when he jumped up 2 spots. It was during the draft when that deal was consummated. But if Hamilton falls and he's sitting there at 9 or 10, I think the Jets would take him at 10. But I think the Jets want to trade back. I really do. I think they want to go back out of that 10 spot. And it makes sense for the Eagles, right? The relationship between Joe and Howie, they work together. I don't know how close they are, off the field, but they did work together. They have a relationship, a good working relationship. The Eagles could jump into 10 and maybe grab Hamilton. Listen, I had them mock draft. I had them taking Dax Hill at 15, the Michigan safety. I just think this kid is so versatile. He could be like a Malcolm Jenkins type player for this team. He's 21 years old. He can play all over the defense if you wanted him to. And he's a guy that obviously if you draft a safety, you've got him for 4 or 5 years in your system to develop and to have at a price control. Look at the price that safeties went for in the offseason. It was exorbitant, the amount of money these safeties and receivers got in the offseason. So, to me, the NFL has evolved, and you have to find guys at those positions that you can bring in and develop. And maybe, to me, it feels like the right time to take a safety because I love the skill set of Dax Hill. I love if Kyle Hamilton's there, you take him. I would. But
yeah, by the way, it was Tom Fornelli from CBSSports.com who had him falling to 21 to the New England Patriots with the Eagles passing on him twice. Man, that would certainly be a conversation for Birds 365 the day after. We'll let you in on it, too. We'll just run a stream of guests coming through here to scream, what the hell were the Eagles doing not taking Kyle Hamilton?
there's going to be a lot to talk about coming out of that first round. There's no doubt. And we all like, how he likes to make trades, but it takes 2 to tango. And, we all say, okay, trade up, trade back, do both, whatever. But it's hard to do that. You have to find the right match. So it's not as easy. It's easier said than done. But yeah, if they pass on Hamilton twice, shame on them because, safety is certainly a position you need to address here. If you want to be in the conversation as a Super Bowl contender, not this season, but next season, when really that's supposed to happen. This year, I don't think they're in the Super Bowl conversation, but next year they could be, depending on Jalen Hurts. But you need a safety that can come in and take control of that defense. And I just think there are 2 really good ones. You can get a guy in the 2nd round, and that's probably where it's going to happen, or maybe the 3rd round they'll take somebody. But gee, why not get one of the best? Why not go for one of the best safeties and do something you've never done before and take one in the first round?
And that brings us to the start of the conversation, Ed. They need a safety. They need a corner. They need a defensive tackle. They need an edge rusher. They need a wide receiver.
Yeah.
There's too many damn needs on this team, Howie. So you can say and he's right, and he is right. It's a long process, talent gathering season, as he likes to call it. And they got Steve Nelson 2 days before training camp last year.
Yeah.
So you can get competent players over the summer still. And it could be the trade route, as you mentioned, with Ronald Darby during the Super Bowl year. But boy, you never know how it affects you on draft night, because maybe Jordan Davis is there, but you need a corner so badly. You take a Trent McDuffie who doesn't have the size maybe you like, or maybe you want to take an edge rusher, which I know Jody wants to take, and George Karlaftis is there, but you feel the need to take Chris Olave because you didn't get Calvin Ridley. All of this is sort of a butterfly effect. And the Eagles have put themselves in a position where even if it's just human nature, they're going to have to lean towards certain positions. And I think that's a mistake. So I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned all the needs, so I just think they take the best player available at one of those positions. Gosh, there's so many, receiver, edge, safety, corner. You mentioned them all. Maybe the Eagles aren't as desperate at corner as we think they are because of the Tay Gowan, who I liked a lot. I got to tell you, coming out of the draft last year from Central Florida, but they feel comfortable with him, Kerry Vincent, and Zach McPherson. But if you get into training camp and you realize, hey, these guys just aren't doing it for us, then that's when you begin to think about a possibility of a trade. And, maybe that's where Jalen Reagor gets traded, right? I mean, he's been in the news this past week, the Eagles taking calls for him. I mean, that's all well, I've been told that they gave Reagor's agent permission to go out and try to find a deal. But again, Howie's just not going to give him away. But if you get into the summer and you don't get a corner in this draft because you go with an edge rusher, and I agree with Joey, I would love to see them take an edge. They need a defensive tackle. They need to rebuild that defensive line for all positions on that defensive line. But if you go into the summer and Gowan and McPherson and company, they're not doing it for you, then you have to start to investigate a trade. Stephon Gilmore's still out there. He was with the Colts. Everybody thought he would sign with the Colts, but he's another guy that probably would benefit by waiting until after the draft to drive up his value. But, maybe he's available. Deshaun Elliott's still out there, a safety that has.
No, he signed with the Lions.
He did. Okay.
Because I thought that was a guy the Eagles would look at. They never did. It surprised me a little bit.
Very surprised. But, there's names that maybe, come to light in the summer where teams begin to look at their roster and they've been in practice for a couple of days. They had their OTAs and they start to think, we're not as strong at position X as we thought we would be. And the Eagles could feel that way at corner if nobody came. And then you start to generate a trade at that point. And to trade Jalen Reagor after June 1st is a lot better than trading him before June 1st in terms of his contract. I think it's a $7-point-something million dead money hit prior to June 1st, post June 1st. I think it's only $1.8 million. So, that would be beneficial. So, I mean, listen, there's all sorts of ways you can go with the position of need if they don't get it in the draft because they have so many positions. And I don't think it's a very deep group of cornerbacks. You have your, the ones everybody mentions, Gardner and Stingley, but then you have Booth and, Andrew Booth and Trent McDuffie and maybe Roger McCreary from Auburn is in there. But after that, I don't think it's real deep. But Cincinnati's got Kobe Bryant, but he's more of a third-round guy. But, if you don't get one, you're going to have to trade for one, I think, or try to sign somebody that's out there in the weeds that they think can help. And that's why I'm not sure they take a corner in the first round. I think safety is more of a bigger need. than a corner, just because they have guys at corner. Whether they're any good or not, we don't know, but they don't have really anybody at safety.
Well,
I like Marcus Epps maybe more than you guys. That you look at his numbers as a 26-year-old, he played over 50% of the snaps, did very well. Can he grow in this defense in his second year? We'll see.
Well, Jody and I, real quick before you jump in, Jody, Jody and I were discussing it earlier when we were talking about veteran players. I think Jody asked me, would you rather have Honey Badger or Stephon Gilmore? And I said, for the Eagles, I'd rather have the safety because they play so much cover two anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get by with a corner like they got by with Steve Nelson. Whereas Jonathan Gannon really wants that versatile piece in the back end, like a Malcolm Jenkins, like he had in Minnesota with Harrison Smith. And that's what Mathau does. You mentioned the kid from Michigan, Kyle Hamilton. All those guys could do that. So maybe it just makes more sense for how Jonathan Gannon wants to run his defense.
Yeah, I would go. Listen, they give you Dax Hill is more than just a safety. He's the guy that can play the Malcolm Jenkins role of, he can step into the slot. He could probably cover you as a corner if he needed to. He can play the linebacker spot. I mean, he would be a very versatile piece at 21 years old. I'm pretty high on Dax Hill, you can tell. It would shock me if the Eagles draft him, as it would Kyle Hamilton. But for it to happen with Hamilton, he would really have to slip. And maybe the guy from CBS Sports is right. You mentioned that he's sitting there at 20 and the Patriots take him, or 21 and the Eagles pass on him twice, which would be foolish. Because I really do think in this day and age and in this Jonathan Gannon defense, I think safeties are very important. And I would agree, Matthew or Gilmore, between Matthew and Gilmore, I would take Matthew in this defense.
All right, Eddie, let's wrap it up on this note. Turn back the calendar 1 year ago. The coaching staff was new here to Philadelphia. They hired head coach who had no head coaching experience, limited coordinator experience. A lot of people went, who's this Sirianni guy? But the Eagles have done their drafts under Howie Roseman the way they've done their draft. And they like to say it's a collaborative effort. But that collaborative level can shift from year to year. And it probably shifted a little backwards last year because these were all guys who had just added to the organization during the offseason. Now we've had a regular season, a winning regular season, a playoff regular season. All right, they got their rear ends kicked by the Bucs in the playoffs, but they did make the playoffs. If the coaching staff's impetus into the draft was X, and this year it's X plus because of the season they had last year, how big is that plus?
Well, it's a big plus. I mean, there's familiarity now, right? I mean, Howie knows, Jonathan Gannon and Nick Sirianni, and kind of knows what they're playing, and he, that having that familiarity should help in the draft. Identify exactly what they need to put onto this team for it to be successful. So, that familiarity, I guess that plus that you're talking about is huge. That can only help. I thought they did a nice job in the draft last year on that short notice when they brought Sirianni and Gannon in, kind of identifying players that would fit. Obviously, it was pretty easy to get a Heisman Trophy winner in here in Devontae Smith, and he looked good. But, they did a good job getting Landon Dickerson, and Milton Williams looks like a player in the third round. And I really think Zach McPherson's going to be given a lot of opportunity to win that starting job opposite Darius Slay. I think when he got some playing time last year, he did okay with it. He had his ups and downs, but really second year guy now, fourth round draft pick, he should be ready to come in and compete to start at that cornerback spot. But yeah, I think this year, if they have another draft like that, and now knowing that what Sirianni and Gannon want to do, it can only help.
All right, Ed Kratz, si.com/NFL/Eagles. You can read Ed there. You can read me there as well if you so decide to do so. Follow him on Twitter at KratzE. You can follow him there. We're doing a lot of draft stuff currently, so make sure you stop by. I'll end it here with you, Ed. Eagles obviously start the process at 15, 18, 51. give me one guarantee as far as a position or a player that they're going to come out in those first 3 picks. No doubt about it. 100% Eagles are coming out with an edge, a receiver, or maybe a particular player.
I would say defensive tackle. I mean, you look at that group. Cox, one year-to-year player now.
Jody's shaking his head at you. That's a Jody. That's a Jody disimproving look.
I'm surprised he didn't go quarterback again like he did previously. They're not taking a DT unless the big kid from Georgia falls down and somehow he's available. Because I think he, like Hamilton, is a top 5 talent, and if you can get him at 15, you just can't pass. But there's not another defensive tackle that's worthy of going. Maybe you went first 2 rounds, right, with your question, John?
Yeah.
So maybe Eddie's right at 51.
Yeah, I mean, Perion Winfrey there or Logan Hall there, perhaps a second round. I just think they need to get somebody on that defensive line, and it could be an edge. You know, that would be my 1A if I had to pick one position, guaranteed. But I'll go tackle because they did bring Barnett back. Think about Barnett. I mean, listen, I think they could use an edge as well. You know who I really like in this draft, real quick, is that kid from Northern Iowa, Trevor Penning, the offensive lineman.
Penning, yeah.
How would you? What kind of shock would that be if the Eagles end up taking an offensive lineman?
Hey, Lane's going to be 32.
Yeah, and he'll be their swing tackle. And this guy plays like John Runyon, man. He's got that attitude. Plays, gives you a couple shots after the whistle. I love that about Trevor Penning. So,
well, I would say you got to move Andre Dillard. So, what is one more for you? We'll sneak it in. What the hell?
Yeah.
Is Andre Dillard going to be here on May 1st? And is Jalen Reagor going to be here on May 1st?
May 1st? Okay, I'll say yes on May 1st. After June 1st, I'm not sure either player is here, to be honest with you. I would probably say no to at least one of them. And it would probably be Dillard just because of the positional value that he gives you. He's a left tackle. And I think he's shown that he is good when he gets on the field. Good enough for a team to trade for. So
good enough for some of these crappy teams, yeah.
Yeah, Reagor maybe not so much, but definitely Dillard. I can see him being traded. And listen, then you're going to need a swing tackle, okay? So keep Trevor Penning in mind as my sleeper pick for the Philadelphia
Raven Clark is your swing tackle, Ed Kratz.
Okay.
Quote the Raven.
For nevermore.
They will be taking offensive linemen. I'm just not
We
sure
started with Stephen King. We end with Edgar Allan Poe. How about that for a show?
More third round than they're out for the Eagles.
Probably right, Jody. Probably right. But I just love this Penning kid, man. I would love to see him come to Philadelphia. It'd be fun to cover and fun to watch.
You're right. He's a player, but he'll be gone when the Eagles are thinking about taking an offensive lineman. Ed, good stuff. We're certainly going to get you up again before the draft. Tell Stephen King we said hi.
All right, fellas. Nevermore.
There is Ed Kratz here with us on Birch.
There we are. I said Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe. You get it all on this show.
He is a literal knucklehead. That's what he is, because he likes quarterback and offensive line for the Eagles. All right, coming back, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We got to put a bow on the show.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of stateside vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Mac guys, last couple of minutes. We got to wrap this bad boy up. We ran a little late with Ed Kratz. Day 13 days until the draft. Oh, we got to knock 2 more off, so we'll be down almost to single digits by the time we get back next week. Johnny Mac, anything of consequence happen over the weekend for the Birds?
Probably not. They're going to wait till after the draft, but something of consequence happened over the break, and that Stephon Gilmore is signing with the Colts. So cross another one off the list. 2 years, $23 million. We'll see how it works out. $14 million guaranteed, that according to Adam Schefter. So, yeah, he's gone.
And if that's the case, that makes Honey Badger to LA more logical, which means the Eagles are still going to be left holding the bag. They better get some secondary help in the early stages of the draft because it still needs upgrading. All right, that will something we'll definitely be talking about come Monday. J-Mac, have yourself a good weekend.
You too, buddy.
Yeah, I got maybe.
Oh, you got the place to yourself. Yeah, maybe I'll stop by.
Maybe the dancers will be coming over this afternoon. I'll give you a heads up. We shall see. Yes, the Birds 365 duo of McMullen and McDonald will be back here Monday early. Be here.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.